Well, as, yeah. Well, after what we just saw, as President Reagan loved to say, that was the sound of freedom. I'd like to start by making sure we first give a big thank you to the VX-9 vampires from China Lake for that great flyover. So good morning and welcome to everyone. My name is John Highbush, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. And before we begin our formal program this morning, I'd like to recognize some special guests that we have with us today. I'll start with several members of our Board of Trustees, and they include Kathy Bush, Rick Caruso, Robert Higdon, Peggy Noonan, and former California Governor Pete Wilson. If you all would please stand. We also have with us today Michael Reagan, the son of President Reagan. Michael. The great Congressman Elton Gowgley and his wife Janice. Elton, thank you for coming. Another terrific Congressman, David Dreyer. David. I also see Congressman Bob Lagomarsino and his wife Norma. Congressman. The commander of Navy Base Ventura County, Captain Larry Vasquez. Captain. Many of our elected officials from Ventura County and surrounding cities. There's a lot here, but if you please just stand and you can be recognized. Thank you for coming. And finally, Duke Blackwood, the director of the Reagan Presidential Library. Duke. I'd like to begin by giving a special thank you to all the men and women here today from the Marine Corps bases at Camp Pendleton and San Diego who have helped so much with today's celebration. This is the Reagan Library's 9th year working in conjunction with Camp Pendleton to pay tribute to President Reagan on his birthday. And we are honored to have the support of our fighting men and women from such vital military installations. On behalf of everyone here, and I am sure people across America, thank you for your service. And now for today's program, in honor of the 102nd birthday of Ronald Wilson Reagan. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the March of the Colors and the playing of our national anthem.
Color guard, present, colors.
Please remain standing for the invocation by Chaplain Wayne McRae, Captain, United States Navy.
Would you please bow your heads with me in prayer? Lord God Almighty, we give you thanks this morning as we remember the life and leadership of President Ronald Reagan, a man who inspired us, who set our nation back on the path of greatness, a man of moral courage and conviction, who based his life on the timeless truths that he found in your inspired word, a man who perceived the complexities of the world in which we live, who knew there were no easy answers, and yet knew the simple answer, to seek the courage required to do that which is morally right. Your blessed servant, with a simple and yet profound understanding that freedom could only truly prosper when religion is vibrant and the rule of law is acknowledged as being under your sovereignty. From your word and his upbringing, he recognized that each of us must take responsibility for our own lives and our own outcomes, and that to be free involved both risk and effort. To that end, he challenged us to be sure that those who come after us will say of us in our time, that in our time, we did everything that could be done. We finished the race. We kept them free. We kept the faith. Father, today we acknowledge that your servant, President Ronald Reagan, kept the faith, both with you and with the people he was sworn to lead. Thank you for sharing him with this great nation. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commanding General of Marine Corps Installations West, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, California, Brigadier General Vincent Colonnes.
Wow, what an opening ceremony, you know, what a patriotic crowd. As I looked, even the cameramen had their hearts covered. Unbelievable. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us here today. While Camp Pendleton has participated in this event for almost a decade, I'm personally honored to join you for the first time with my wife. Marines are always particularly proud to serve here each year as a personal representative on behalf of the President of the United States. The Marines here today represents thousands of Marines deployed around the world, many in harm's way. Our uniformed presence here serves as a small token of respect and gratitude our Marines have for President Ronald Reagan. As Marines, we're proud to be the nation's expeditionary force. We move towards the sounds of the gun, and we bring the fight to the enemy. Ronald Reagan showed courage that we can admire as Marines. He did not back down in the face of communism. Instead, he demanded they do the right thing. We've been at war for over a decade, and throughout our history, many Marines have given the ultimate sacrifice to their country. President Reagan understood service, and he understood military service. And it was under his watch that the military once again could hold their heads a little higher. He helped bring pride back to the service and into our military. Many of us in the military hold a close affiliation with an admiration for President Reagan. And he once said, "Some people wonder all their lives if they made a difference. The Marines don't have that problem." We are forever grateful for the legacy of President Reagan, and it's an honor to be here today. Semper Fidelis, and God bless.
Thank you, General. I'd now like to introduce Fred Ryan, Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Fred has served President and Mrs. Reagan since 1982 in roles including Director of Presidential Appointments and Scheduling in the White House, and as President Reagan's first post-presidency Chief of Staff. Fred?
Thank you, John. Thank you, General Colonese. I was so pleased to have the chance to talk to the General beforehand to learn that he received his commission as an officer in the Marine Corps during Ronald Reagan's presidency. President Reagan was tremendously proud of our men and women in uniform, and seeing the Camp Pendleton Marines here today and the Marine Color Guard, the Marine Band that just played for us, I know certainly would have filled him with pride. He used to tell a story about General George C. Marshall during World War II was asked, "Does America have a secret weapon that will end the war?" And General Marshall's answer was, "Yes, the best darn kids in the whole world." And it's as true today as it's ever been. So thank you, Marines, and thank all of you in uniform who so proudly serve our country. Well, today we are gathered to celebrate President Reagan's 102nd birthday, or as he would describe it, probably the 63rd anniversary of his 39th birthday. And I think many of you were here 2 years ago when we celebrated Ronald Reagan's centennial. And his 100th birthday was celebrated not just here, but at venues around the world, with special tributes taking place from Grosvenor Square in London to Prague, Budapest, Krakow, across Eastern Europe, where Ronald Reagan is remembered there not just as the great communicator, but as the great liberator. The purpose of the Reagan Library is not so much to look back, but to look forward. As President Reagan always made clear, the mission of the library should be not just about the successes of the past, but about the promises of the future. It was his dream that this library serve as an inspiration to young people, a place where they might learn from his presidency and learn from his leadership and share his vision, a timeless vision of hope and optimism for America and his belief that our best days lie ahead. President Reagan's legacy is one of civility and respect. And yes, while he held deep core beliefs, he fought hard, he played to win, he did the utmost to defeat his opponents, but never to destroy them. And at the end of the day, he showed he could get together with his political adversaries in an atmosphere of goodwill and mutual respect. And I think the country was better off then because of that. Well, today we are honored to hear from one of the architects of an important aspect of President Reagan's legacy, the fight against organized crime and illegal drugs. In 1981, President Reagan appointed Rudy Giuliani to be his Associate Attorney General. In that role, he oversaw the U.S. Attorney's offices, federal law enforcement agencies, the Bureau of Corrections, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the U.S. Marshals. In 1983, President Reagan appointed him U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, where he led the effort to jail drug dealers, fight organized crime, break corruption in government, and prosecute white-collar criminals. Rudy Giuliani was elected mayor by his fellow New Yorkers in 1993, and soon crime plummeted, New York's economy soared, and he was credited with launching the Renaissance of New York, one of the greatest urban revivals anywhere in the world. And then, months before stepping down from 8 years of remarkable accomplishments, on September 11, 2001, Mayor Giuliani was called upon to rally the city he loved, and through it, the nation, in the aftermath of the worst attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. For the inspiration and strength of his leadership for America and the world, Time magazine named him Person of the Year, and Queen Elizabeth granted him an honorary knighthood. Then, he was recognized as he is today with the title that, I know he has many titles, but the one I think he probably enjoys most is that of America's Mayor. Please join me in welcoming Rudy Giuliani.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you. It's a really great honor to be here. I should correct Fred only in one respect. The most important honor that I received was from Nancy Reagan, and I was given the Ronald Reagan Freedom Medal. And I always considered that to be the most important honor I received because much of what I did as mayor, I learned from Ronald Reagan. I just copied him in the smaller context of a city, copied his principles, his approach. I watched him deal with the air traffic controllers, and every time I had a strike, I told them, "You want to end up the same way they ended up?" It helped a lot to have worked for Ronald Reagan. But from the perspective of history, as we can now look back on the 20th century, since we're out of it now for a decade, I don't think there's any doubt that the two most consequential presidents of the 20th century were Franklin Roosevelt in the first half of the century and Ronald Reagan in the second half of the century. And as I think about it, there are probably only 3 American presidents that have delivered so many millions of people out of bondage and oppression. Abraham Lincoln, slavery; Franklin Roosevelt, fascism and Nazism; and Ronald Reagan, communism. We've had many great presidents, but I don't think there are any other presidents that can match the contribution to human dignity that was made by those 3 presidents in delivering so many millions of people from oppression. And when we're here at a library and celebrating his 102nd birthday, you'd be right to think that, well, maybe this is all a wonderful historical exhibit, and it will be someday a wonderful historical exhibit. But what is represented here, what's taught here, is not yet part of our history. Almost everything that Ronald Reagan fought for, almost everything Ronald Reagan stood for, almost all the principles that guided Ronald Reagan's career are presently a part of our national debate. This isn't like a library for Lincoln or Roosevelt, part of our history. This is part of our present. We're still debating the size of government, aren't we? We're still debating if taxes have an impact on the economy, and what kind of impact do they have on the economy? Does taking taxes out of the economy help grow the economy, or does it weaken the economy? We're still debating not the existence of the social safety net, that's a given. We're debating how big should it be, how large, and we're debating whether it should be an encouragement to improvement or a limit on growth. Every one of those things were things that Ronald Reagan introduced into our national debate. Before Ronald Reagan, we did not debate those things. It was just a given that government grew from Roosevelt to Johnson, one government program after another, government growth, higher taxes. No one questioned, really, in any meaningful way, any of these things. Ronald Reagan, by the force of his personality, by the strength of his rhetoric, by his conviction, introduced all of these things into our national debate. And unlike the Roosevelt era, the New Deal reached its climax with the Great Society. We have not reached the end of the era of Ronald Reagan, because all the same things he fought for are still actively being debated and discussed, and they haven't yet been resolved. When I think of Ronald Reagan, and when I borrowed from him as mayor of New York, the most important thing were his strong beliefs. And boy, could we use that now. Ronald Reagan, held these strong beliefs without being offensive and without being inflexible and without being unwilling to compromise. Remember, if I can get 80%, then I had a victory. Or my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. There was these strong convictions, but then also this practical sense that as an executive you have to accomplish, you have to do things. And in a democracy by definition is a compromise. That's what it is. We're too darn big to all get our own way. We're never going to agree on everything. But Ronald Reagan, I often try to simplify it into two principal beliefs that he had. Number one, that communism was evil, that it was useless to negotiate with it, that you had to confront it, gain leverage, and then negotiate with it. Number two, that having been a Democrat, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, so was I. Winston Churchill was also a liberal. You know Winston Churchill's remark, someone who's not a liberal when they're 20 has no heart, and someone who's not a conservative by the time they're 40 has no brain. So, Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, and I, and many, many others, went from having a heart to having a brain. But Ronald Reagan saw what Roosevelt did under the tremendous pressure of the Depression to try to help people, put these programs in place. But then he also saw how those programs had become so large, so big, to the point where rather than moving people out of poverty, they were holding people in poverty. They were denying people the instruments that they need to work their way out of poverty. They were almost eradicating the work ethic, which is the main thing you need to get out of poverty. So he believed these two things. He believed them from the day that he entered politics when he ran for governor of this great state. And he believed them on the day that he left the Oval Office. And the thing about it is, he did not develop these ideas because they were popular. He didn't develop these ideas the way many of our modern political and other leaders develop their ideas, by taking public opinion polls. Because if he had taken a public opinion poll, he would have been told that the American people didn't agree with either one of those things. Remember, he emerged when Barry Goldwater ran for president of the United States. Barry Goldwater held the ideas I just said. Barry Goldwater was defeated. I think he won one state. He was wiped out. So when Ronald Reagan stepped forward with this clarion call, with these two big ideas, they were exceedingly unpopular and certainly not a prescription for success in American politics. So where do they come from? Where do these ideas come from? They came from Ronald Reagan. They came from his experience as head of the Screen Actors Guild. They came from his 8 or 9 years of lecturing all over the country for General Electric and listening to the words and the feelings and the emotions and the desires of the American people and incorporating those into him. It came from his reading. It came from his thinking. It came from his writing, which we now know he did prolifically. So what we got was not a recitation of a public opinion poll by someone that isn't a leader but really an actor. What we actually got was someone who gave of himself. We got Ronald Reagan, what he really believed. And because he could stick to those two things, by the time he was about to leave office, it was virtually assured that Berlin Wall, piece of it over there, by the way, right back there is a piece of the Berlin Wall. Berlin Wall down. Soviet Union gone. Those countries today that are celebrating Ronald Reagan, Poland, the Czech Republic, Latvia, Lithuania, this man is a god there. Millions of people that lived in oppression were now free. Most men do not get to do that in their lifetime. Very few presidents get to do that in their term of office. And I believe those changes came about because he had strong beliefs, because he was a leader. And I also believe that the change in our economy that took place came about because he had strong beliefs and because he knew how to guide us to a destination. I think Ronald Reagan would have found the notion of leading from behind to be a contradiction. When you lead from behind, here's what you're doing. You're following. You lead from the front. So all of this and more is part of Ronald Reagan's legacy. But but before we conclude, we just have to say one thing about something that happens in this country, and I know there are people that now dispute it, but for me this is just an absolute given, and I believe it completely when I read our history. No matter how bad things have been for us, no matter how difficult things have been for us, and America has gone through some very, very difficult times, worse than we're going through now. It always seems that God finds the right person at the right time and put them into the right office and the right circumstances just when we thought things were so bad to save us. 1979 and 1980, we thought things were pretty bad. Much like today, most Americans thought this country was going in the wrong direction. Much like today, most Americans thought there wasn't much hope of an America that would be better for our children than it was for us. American empire had ended. It was over. Just at the right time, maybe just at the last minute, God found someone for us, Ronald Reagan, like he had done a number of other times in our past. So I think on Ronald Reagan's birthday, the best thing to say is thank you, God, for giving us Ronald Reagan 102 years ago, and thank you for blessing America. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for those very thoughtful remarks. Now I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for the laying of the wreath and honors to President Reagan. The President of the United States has directed that a presidential wreath be laid at the resting place of all former presidents on the anniversary of their birth. Brigadier General Vincent A. Colonese, Commanding General, Marine Corps Installation West, Marine Corps Base, Camp Pendleton, California, is designated to place a wreath at the tomb of the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan, on 6 February 2013 in honor of the 102nd anniversary of his birth and in tribute to his distinguished service to a grateful nation.
Please remain standing for the retiring of the colors. This concludes today's ceremony. Thank you all so much for coming. Please, if you can, join us inside the cafe for a piece of President Reagan's birthday cake. Again, thank you for coming. God bless you all.